Good morning, and welcome to Trinity United Church, Gravenhurst, and happy Victoria Day weekend. I hope things are going well, and if you were able to get out this weekend, you got outside. As I start off usual these Sundays, I want to say hi to my mother, and to my Aunt Shirley, and to my Aunt Carolyn. I started a little bit something I have to keep up there now. I did get to see my mother for Mother's Day, but I didn't get to see her until Wednesday. And I did not realize that at the seniors' homes and the nursing residences and those kind of places where my mother lives, there is a kind of a competitive nature amongst the people. So I showed up with some food that Colleen had cooked, and a nice little orchid plant, nice purple, very pretty. And so my mother and I sat outside on, social distancing on the sidewalk with the sun coming down with the table between us. It was very nice. And my mom's neighbor came out. And my mom said, "Hi, this is my son," introduced me. And then she said, "Oh, look, my son bought me this nice little orchid." And the woman next to her said, "Oh, that's nice. My 3 sons brought me plants as well." And there on her veranda were these gigantic planters. So I'm like, okay, I didn't realize this was a competition. So next time, I'm bringing the biggest planter you can possibly find. I may need a backhoe to get it in on the step here, but I'm going to make up for my shortfallings of this tiny little orchid. I did not know this was the thing, but apparently it is. And also wanted to say hi to the folks who are watching us from other seniors' homes. I realize people tune in. I know next door at the Manor, quite a few of our congregation tune in and watch us. I want to say hi to them. And the folks up in Bracebridge at Castle Peaks, I know there's at least 3 families that tune in. I want to say hi to them this morning as well. Now, I have to admit I'm working under a bit of a strain this morning because this is May 2-4 weekend, and this is usually when I go to PEI. This is my first weekend of the summer to go. Now, I've been talking to my friend down there saying I wanted to come, and he said I'm not allowed to come. Now, nothing hurts a Maritimer's heart like being heard and told you're not allowed to come home. So I told him, I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll just drive to the New Brunswick border. You come in the boat and pick me up. And we'll just sail across, maybe like at twilight or dusk or something. I thought that was a good plan. You know what he wrote me back? He said the RCMP are patrolling the beaches, and that if you come over in a boat to get to your cottage at PEI, they turn you back. So, I'm sorry. I'm a bit sad this morning. My final plan, other than parachuting in under the cover of dark, I got nothing. So I'm here. So if I seem sad this morning, that is why. Anyway, we're going to have a good service, and wherever you are, I hope you're going to have a nice weekend. So this morning's service is practical. We're going to talk about practical spiritual advice, and I've got a couple of opening thoughts here. Mahatma Gandhi, I think everybody knows who that is. He says, "I claim to be a simple individual, liable to err like any other fellow mortal. I own, however, that I have humility enough to confess my errors and retrace my steps." The Dalai Lama, "If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion." And I thought we had to have a quote from Little Richard, who passed away this week. And I always felt bad about Little Richard. He is a pioneer in the rock field and amazing character. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, there's lots of pictures on the internet and TV, but Prince looked an awful lot like Little Richard. So I always thought that's where he got his style from. And Little Richard said, "I think that a man should be caring." I thought that was a pretty good quote. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor around 171 AD. "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who is a French author who wrote actually The Little Prince, "Tell me who admires and loves you, and I will tell you who you are." So there's some thoughts for the day. Let us begin with our opening prayer. Sculpting God, you give galaxies their form, shape granite mountains, and design butterfly wings. Dancing God, you choreograph the path of stars and the flight of snow geese. Singing God, your divine song is sung by sparrows, mountain streams, and the rushing winds. Wonderful God, we rejoice to be a part of the divine world, which you love and sustain. Amen. So our opening hymn is He Leadeth Me.
Live in charity and steadfast love. Live in charity. God will dwell in you. Live in charity and steadfast and steadfast love, live in charity. God will dwell with you.
Sometimes we hurt our friends, sometimes we hurt ourselves, sometimes we hurt God. Our prayer of confession is a chance to say, we're sorry. You asked for my hands that you might use them for your purpose. I gave them for a moment, then withdrew them, for the work was hard. You asked for my mouth to speak out against injustice. I gave you a whisper that I might not be accused. You asked for my eyes to see the pain of poverty. I closed them, for I did not want to see. You asked for my life that you might work through me. I have a small part that I might not get too involved. Oh God, forgive me for my calculated efforts to serve you, only when it is convenient for me to do so, only in those places where it is safe to do so, and only with those who make it easy to do so. Oh God, forgive me, renew me, send me out as a usable instrument, that I might take seriously the meaning of your cross. Amen. To all who turn from sin and sorrow, to all who turn to God in hope, this is God's words of acceptance. We are accepted, we are forgiven, we are loved. This gift we have from God. Thanks be to God.
Live in charity and steadfast love. Live in charity. God will dwell with you. Live in charity and steadfast love. Live in charity. God will dwell with you.
So we're going to continue with the letters that Peter wrote, Peter the apostle, disciple, but this is the last time I'm doing them. I've done them 3 times now in 4 weeks, so I'm not going to do them anymore. But I thought some people said they'd never really heard of him as a writer before, so I thought I would just flesh him out a little bit. So I'm going to tell you one more aspect of his character. So this again is obviously a medieval portrait. It's done about the Passion story, and I don't know if you would remember this or not, because it's one of those little pieces of the Passion story we don't talk about very often. So this is in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Judas betrays Jesus, and Jesus is surrounded by his disciples, and this is the depiction of Peter, the disciple, with a sword, cutting off the ear of the servant of the high priest. So it's one of those things we never talk about. I've never heard a sermon preached on it. I've never heard anybody even mention it other than reading maybe through the passage. And one of the interesting things about it is it's in every gospel. A lot of pieces are mixed and matched in the gospels. This story is in every gospel, but the only 2 people who are named are Malchus, the servant, and Peter. And they're only named in John's gospel. Now, in the mythology and in one of the Gospels, Jesus tells Peter to put away the sword and actually reattaches the ear back onto the servant. So it calls into question all kinds of interesting things. One, what was Peter doing with a sword? Because we understand from Jesus that he's a pacifist. And this story again illustrates the idea that the kingdom is not going to come because of violence, it's going to come because of peace. But it is an interesting depiction of Peter himself, that he has a kind of an interesting nature to him. So, just want you to have a very practical, as I was going to say. So, the other thing I want you to keep in mind again is the stories that are written in the Gospels are about young people. As best we can tell, Jesus was no older than 33 when he was crucified. So that means that almost all the people he would be dealing with would be younger than him, not older than him. So his followers would be in their 20s, maybe in their early 30s. So they're really just a gang of young men and women. But the stories get written down when they're old, not when they're young. So Peter, when he wrote his letters, was probably 67, and I hate to say that because that's close to my age, but 67 or 66 years old when he wrote it down, because he died when he was about 69. He was crucified. So you got to remember again, these are young people. They're young people's actions. And one of the verses Courtney's going to read is this, which is really interesting. Again, it's one of Peter's messages. Love one another, be like-minded, be sympathetic, be compassionate, be humble of heart. Again, very practical daily instructions for human beings. Thanks, Courtney.
A reading from 1 Peter chapter 3. Suffering for doing good. Finally, all of you live in harmony with one another. Be sympathetic, love as brothers, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult, but with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing. For whoever would love life and see good days must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from deceitful speech. He must turn from evil and do good. He must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil.
Jesus' hands were kind hands, doing good to all. Pain and sick and sickness, blessing children small. Washing tired feet and saving those who fall. Jesus' hands were kind hands, doing good to all. Take my hands, O Jesus, let them work for you. Make them strong and gentle, kind in all I do. Let me watch you, Jesus, till I'm gentle too. Till my hands are kind hands, quick to work for you.
So how's the sun factor this morning? Is it my sun factor? My head too shiny? It is, yeah. I know. Okay, I get complaints about it every we might have to dampen it. I even moved the Bible back so it didn't bounce so much off the Bible to my head. So somebody said, well, as long as you stay out here, it's not so bad. So I'm trying to stay out ahead of it. But you know, it's funny. Preach a sermon. No comments. Sun shines off your head, 10 comments. It's amazing what gets people's attention. So I'm going to talk about spiritual samurai. It's a very weak connection, so but it's a kind of a catchy title. So that's what we're going to go with this morning, Spiritual Samurai. So I make this mistake every so often when I preach. I name a movie or a TV program or something because I'm using it as an example, and then people go home and watch it, and then they blame me because it's terrible. So I forget to do a disclaimer. So I'm giving a disclaimer. Don't listen to me. I'm just using it as an example. I mentioned, I don't know if you remember, I mentioned about 3 or 4 weeks ago, Table 19, which is a wedding movie. Well, somebody went out and decided to rent it and watch it and said, I'll never get that $5 back. Not my fault, I'm sorry. I should have put a disclaimer on it. I never said that the movie was good. I was just using it as an example. So, I'm going to use another TV program as an example. Don't go watch it. I'm just using it as an example. Okay? So this is called a samurai TV program called Mental Samurai. So, it's a trivia thing. So what's different about it, its catch is unlike Jeopardy, where you just stand there at a stand and talk to Alex Trebek back and forth politely. In this trivia game, they put you in that big ball up there. And it's on a big extended arm. And there's 5 categories of questions you have to answer. And you got, 25 seconds or 30 seconds. You have to get 100%. And the ball swings you back and forth between each category. So not only do you have to get the category right, the next thing you know, and it's fast. It's not not Alex Trebek style. It's like, whoosh, it's like a circus ride. So what the idea is, it throws you off your mental concentration. So what you usually look like is this in between. By the time you get to the next question, you look like that poor woman. This is actually off the show. That's her when they first go from one question to the other. So again, how ready are you to answer a question? And what's fascinating when you watch it is people who say, they'll say like one of the categories will be memory. So they'll flash up 8 objects, and then you have to remember what place one of those things was in. People will say, well, I teach memory classes, so I'm not worried about that category. And when they get over to that category, they can't remember a thing. They're so shaken up by the physical experience that they do poorly in the categories that they just assume they're really good at. So we're going to play a little bit of spiritual samurai today. I wish I could pick you all up. Maybe Andrea can wiggle the camera around a bit. Everybody at home will be kind of dizzy. But we're going to go through the categories that Peter mentioned in his gospel lesson, or in his epistle today. So here we go. This is what he said. Be agreeable, be sympathetic, be loving, be compassionate, be humble. That goes for all of you. No exceptions, no retaliation, no sharp-tongued sarcasm. Instead, bless. That's your job, to bless. You'll be a blessing and also get a blessing. So those are our categories we're going to go through, and I'm going to ask you to reflect as we go through them how well you do at those in your own personal life, okay? And we're going to start off with compassion. Compassion is a great category, right? So he says 2 words. He says sympathy and compassion. Now, we look very differently on those 2 words in the modern age, right? Sympathy is something we feel for someone. Somebody falls down the stairs, we feel sympathetic for them. That's very different than compassion. So compassion comes from the Latin to suffer with, right? So the word passion, in modern parlance, we think of passion as being something erotic. I have passion. What's your passion? I have passion for this person. I have passion for strawberries, whatever it might be. But the actual root of the word for passion means to suffer, right? And as I always say, anybody who's ever been married understands that, right? To have passion is to suffer, right? They come hand in hand. So to have compassion means to suffer with. So it's different than sympathy, right? So to have compassion means it's like empathy. It means you're not just feeling for the person, you're feeling with the person. You're understanding what they're going with. Now, in the times of COVID-19, you understand that we feel a lot like each other. One of the things that's happening is people are starting to understand what other people's lives are like because we share a similarity in terms of isolation and mobility or lack of mobility. So we're getting to understand a feeling that maybe we've never had with other people before. We understand that we're almost all isolated in some way or another. So we're able to have compassion for people, perhaps, whose lives are isolated. I mean, one of the things we're starting to understand around compassion, I think, is what is happening to people in long-term care homes in ways that we never understood before, unless we have a relative or someone we love in a home. We've never understood how bad it can be until now for people who are permanently isolated, and then when threat of disease comes in, how terrifying it can be. So we start to build compassion. And compassion, I'm convinced, is a learned thing. I don't think we just are born with compassion. I think we're born with sympathy. If you watch children play on the school ground or in a play yard or something, and one of them falls down and bumps his head, typically one of the other children will come over and pat them on the shoulder or see if they're okay, right? Children are pretty good at that. But the idea of understanding to feel with is different. My first experience with compassion is a kind of an odd one in which it's always stuck in my mind. It always relates to driving for me because I swear, most of my life in a vehicle going somewhere. I was coming back from a summer field from the Maritimes back to Montreal, driving a beat-up old van. It's late in September because I know I'm at least 2 weeks late for university because I always hated to go back to university, so I'd stay longer than I should. And this old van, I'm coming back, and I'm going through New Brunswick, and I pass some guy on the side of the road, and he's jacking up his car, and he's obviously got a flat tire, and I'm like, and I remember laughing to myself and going, ha ha, sucker, I'm like, isn't that funny, that poor guy's on the side of the road. Driving along, I swear, 20 minutes later, my tire goes flat. Right? Just crossed into Quebec. I know this very well. Just got into Quebec. Boom, tire goes, and I'm driving this old beat-up van, right? It's got nothing on the interior, just 2 seats at the front. Sounds like a tin boat on the Atlantic. It's just banging all the time. And of course, guess what? Who has no spare tire? I don't. Right? So I had to stop at the side of the road and just stand there. Because it's the days before cell phones, I just stand there. And all I can think of is, why did you laugh at that guy? Like, this is how the world works, dude. I'm about 19 years old, right? So I just stand there. And eventually, a guy comes by, and I'm in Quebec, so he's a French guy. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be bad, right? This is not going to work out. And he and I attempt to converse, half French, half English, back and forth. He tells me, he helps me get the tire off. He puts it in his truck, and he and I drive. We drive to Victoriaville, if you can imagine that, because I think about it every time I pass it, back and forth to PE and I think about my trip to Victoriaville. Victoriaville is known for 2 things, hockey sticks and caskets. I've always remembered that. So we had to drive all the way to Victoriaville from the highway, and he found me a tire and got it put on the rim, took it back, helped me put it on, and didn't charge me even, I'm sure, not even what it was worth. And off I went. Ever since then, I have stopped every time I could on the highway. I developed compassion because I had to learn it. And it's always stuck with me. It's weird the way it happens. So, are you compassionate? Do you understand compassion? All right. Second category. I think it's even worse. Humility. I love this quote. I've used it once before. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. Right? Now, do you ever hear anybody, and I can just imagine who might be the person that uses this. I've heard this expression before, honestly, from people. I'm the most humble person you'll ever meet. It's like somebody saying, I'm the most spiritual person you'll ever meet. Right? You can't say those things because they don't work that way. Right? You can't claim your own humility. Somebody has to give you your humility. But how hard is it to be humble in this age? Because everything we watch, almost everywhere, is always telling us to be better than we are. So if we're better than we are we not humble anymore? Can you be better humble? Can you be better at being humble? I don't know. It's confusing then. So I don't know what being better is. But I know Peter was very convinced about being humble. And I think he learned that because if you think back to the stories of the gospel, Peter, who talked about being humble, in the Gospels was always fighting with his brother about who was going to be the greatest disciple. If you listen to the stories, he's always arguing, and Jesus comes in and says, what are you arguing about? Neither of you will be the greatest. So when he's 20 or 25 or whatever he is as a young disciple, he's thinking about being the best. And when he's an old man, he starts thinking about humility and encouraging humility. So he has learned somewhere on that path what it is to be humble. Now this category confuses me. Being agreeable. Be agreeable. What does it mean to be agreeable? I don't know. I like this one. Sometimes I just agree with people so they'll shut up. Do you ever do that? Absolutely, all the time. Perfect silence. Hey! Right? Like what? I'm not quite sure what it is to be agreeable, but Peter really was convinced that was the way to be. Now maybe again it goes back to the days when the disciples fought with each other all the time. Right? I don't know. But I know one thing is, in any kind of relationship, you have to learn to be agreeable at some point in the relationship. I remember when I used to do marriage counseling and pre-marriage counseling for couples, and they would always say, what's your best piece of advice for marriage? And I would say it's simply this, and it only applies to males. Learn to go, I'm sorry, I didn't know what I was doing. That's the only piece of advice that I have for you. Other than that, I got nothing. I literally have nothing for you. The rest of it is a mystery to me. So I think being agreeable is pretty significant. Now the other ones get a bit more serious. Don't pay back evil for evil. No retribution. And we live in an age where vengeance is mine, and revenge is a big deal. And I saw this quote, and I thought it was interesting because it paraphrases it or reframes it in a different way. Don't let the ugly in others kill the beauty in you. And I think it's so easy in our modern culture for us to get frustrated because of somebody else's actions when they impede our progress in whatever way that might be. How quickly we can get angry. And then we become just like that person, whoever we're angry. Whether they're a TV personality, whether they're our neighbor, doesn't matter who they are, whether they're distance or close. Now, I always use, again, driving as my major... I did find a nice picture with a good finger, not a bad finger. I had to really work at finding that, right? But I mean, how often? I can't drive to church on Sunday morning without having to talk to myself first and say, whatever happens on the road today, Allan, be calm. Don't do this. Or 100 other things you might do. Right? And I laugh because a friend of mine, an old friend who was a doctor, and this is back again when I was young, and he was a very gentle man. And he came back. I was at his place. He came back and he said, I got so mad at some guy at the road today. And then he said, I got so mad I gave him the finger. And then he literally held up that finger. And I thought, that's how gentle that man is. He doesn't even know what the finger is, right? It was a wonderful thing to see in a human being, right? But it's just so natural for us to get angry at people. I remember when I was again a young father, and my son Dan was in the car with me. He probably was 3, maybe 4. I was a bit of a hot temper when I was younger, and we were driving somewhere, and somebody cut me off or something, and I rolled down the window and yelled something at them, not even thinking about my son being in the car. I'm sure he was in the car seat. And we drove on for another mile or 2 or 3, and came up to a light, and somebody else did something, and I hear the window go down in the back. And he yells the same thing I yelled at the person in the car next to me. And it was not nice, folks. So, that's when I realized, well, not only is it bad for us, like it's bad for everybody, bad for our children. I saw this was great. I thought I might get one of these. This guy, he just holds a little sign, and when somebody bugs him, he just holds it up and says, "Are you serious?" It seems like a step down, doesn't it? I'm not sure, because if you were driving in New Jersey, the guy next would pick out a gun and shoot that right out of your hand, right? So I'm not sure if it's really going to de-escalate or not. But, again, not paying back evil for evil is another way of saying don't escalate. And in our culture, we escalate all the time. Can we not do that? We escalate in our relationships. We escalate with our neighbors. We escalate when we get in trouble with authority. Is there a way we can't do that? Now, and the other one, this is probably one of the most difficult ones in the world. Sarcasm. Peter actually says, no sharp-tongued sarcasm. And I would dare say this is probably more common. I don't know. I hate to generalize because I think men can be just as sarcastic as women. But here's the two men and woman in a car. Of course you never get lost. Men never get lost, right? Somebody once said the reason that Moses wandered for 40 years in the desert was because he was a man and he wouldn't ask for directions. I don't know how true that is, but maybe, could be. And this is the one that mostly is me, is it says, don't go too far. And the caption on it is, the woman is saying to the man, are you really going to wear that? I don't know if that happens to any of you at home. Probably not. But sarcasm rears its ugly head. Now, I don't know if you watch again. I'm not recommending you watch Big Bang. 10 million people watch it, but I'm not recommending it. I loved in the development of Sheldon's character in Big Bang, he had to learn what sarcasm was. He literally did not understand the concept of sarcasm. So here's somebody that actually had to learn a bad thing because his mind did not he could not compute the idea that someone would say something and not mean it. So if they said, oh, nice outfit, and he's wearing like a Superman t-shirt, he assumed they thought that was a nice thing when they were being sarcastic. So it's the reverse modality. There are people in the world who are not sarcastic at all. And I kind of wonder maybe if Peter's one of those guys because he seems so straight-laced. I don't think Peter would have liked sarcasm at all. So the last category is be loving. And I think this is Nelson Mandela's quote, one of Nelson Mandela's quote. And of course, we all know that Nelson Mandela spent a majority of his adult life in prison, in not a very good prison, and eventually get out and became Prime Minister of South Africa. There can be no greater gift than that of giving one's time and energy to help others without expecting anything in return. It's another way of talking about how we love each other. There is no expectation of anything in return. That pure love is just giving, not receiving. So, how you doing in those categories? And I only have a couple of people here to ask, so I'm not going to look at them because that's not fair at all. So one of the things, as I said at the beginning, that happens in the program, which is fascinating, is that the categories in which people are very comfortable in, and like I said, they only have to get one answer wrong and they're out, right, of the category. So only one wrong. Often they get out on the category they're most comfortable with. And I always find that kind of interesting, and I ask myself the question, why would that be? And I suspect it's because the categories that we really think we're most comfortable in, we don't give much thought to. When I come to a church often, for the first time, when I'm the new minister, the church people will, I say, what do you like about your church? And they will often say to me, we're so welcoming. And I always find that fascinating. So I will start to ask around and say, are they really welcoming? And people will say, not really. They're friendly, but they're not welcoming. Because people have a perception when they come into church and they've been there for a while that they're friendly with each other. But they don't notice when new people come. And every church I've ever been has been the same thing. And my job is often, again, is going to the category they assume they're good at and saying, no, you're friendly with each other. When you go down to coffee, you sit at your own tables you sit at every week. Never change. When you come to church, you sit in your own pews. You don't like other people sitting in them. And when I came here, same as I've come to every other church, what's the first thing I did? I made you get up, and I made you welcome each other. I made you go find out people you didn't know. I made you do that. You know why I know I made you do that? Because when I first started, you hated it. You told me you wouldn't do it. You didn't like it. And I said, just let me try it for 6 months. And by the end of 6 months, you know what you told me? Nothing. Because you already thought you did that forever. And if I tried to stop that now, you'd be angry with me. Right? Because now you're welcoming. Now you've found your strength. Now you found the category that works for you. And I think we do that a lot in our lives. We think we're compassionate. Maybe we're just compassionate to our families. Maybe we think we're not sarcastic when maybe we really are sarcastic. Right? Maybe we think we're loving, but maybe we're only loving in places where we're comfortable. I'm not being critical, I'm just, because I ask these questions of myself. I mean, I'm the one who stands up here and tells you all the stupid stories of all the bad things I've done in my life, right? So I think I'm pretty open about that kind of stuff, right? I'm just saying it's interesting that Peter, at the end of his life, is still saying to his followers, remember, be loving, be compassionate, don't be sarcastic, be nice to people. Like, he's still saying it at the end of his career. So it's got to be important. So I have one last quote for you here. I think it's kind of nice. Whether we are becoming more anxious or more loving, everything takes practice, and everything starts with one thought. So what's that thought? This all doesn't come easy, right? We all have to start somewhere. We all have to have a thought or a direction. Are we going to become more anxious? Are we going to become more loving? Are we going to become more compassionate? And how are we going to do that? Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Allan. Good morning. I want to welcome the wonderful Linda Valcourt to the piano. I'm going to Lysol the piano first. But I want to announce another competition, challenge, contest, rewriting some hymns. So I'm challenging the congregation or anybody involved in the church to send in new lyrics to a familiar hymn from our hymn book. And it could be about COVID, it could be about Allan's sermons or something in the church, something positive. And but mostly to capture what's been going on maybe in the last couple of months in a hymn setting. So I've done this as an example, and Linda has kindly agreed to sing the new words to Precious Lord, Take My Hand. And so I'll welcome you now, Linda. You can say a few words if you want.
Actually, I was looking forward to this so I could say hello to everybody. Hello, everybody out there. I miss you all. And I want to say a special hello to my friends at the Manor. I've been thinking about you. I missed our birthday parties. I hope things get back to normal soon. While I'm here, and Dan's not finished yet, so let me say, Allan, that was an excellent sermon. I connected with it somehow. I liked all of it. And let me see, what else do I want to say? Oh, this mask. My sister made this one, and Joanne made Dan's. And I believe that between the two of those ladies, they've probably made hundreds. So this is the kind of loving and caring and compassion that people are showing to each other. And there's some things about, I'm ashamed to say, that I'm enjoying about COVID-19. That doesn't sound quite right. It's an evil thing, but I know that we're finding some nuggets of precious stuff in it. Okay. Okay. I want to keep my voice clear for Dan's new lyrics. Precious Lord, take my hand, and in a line I shall stand. and my mask I've outworn. So far, so good? Okay. But the health officials say in my home I must stay. So take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. When the news grows drear and the governments appear not to know what to do for our sake, it's a blessing to see that my neighbor calls on me. Take my hand, precious neighbor, lead me home. Well, there's some who will return to the rat race where they'll earn back the dough, the money, the gold. But there's a truth to realize. Wipe the teardrops from our eyes. Take our hand, precious Lord, lead me home.
Thank you so much, Linda. So if you think you can write some new lyrics, send them to Courtney at the email from the website, and I'll get them, and next Sunday we'll present, well, whatever we can. So good luck, and please have them in by Thursday, and we're looking forward to seeing what you have. Thank you.
That was great. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Dan. I think you should put the words in too. I think that'd be great. Like in the bulletin for people to see. Yeah. We come to our pastoral prayer. As I've said before, we recognize that there are people at home by themselves. I mean, a lot of us are fortunate to have somebody else around. Some people are by themselves, so we think in particular about those folks. Some families are facing illness and disease and all kinds of complications that come when society collapses a bit on itself, so we'd like to think about those folks as well. As I've said before, sometimes it's nice if you can just reach out and put your hand on the computer screen or whatever mechanism you're watching on and just try and connect up with those people who need your energy and your support and your love. It's always nice to feel that we're all together and we're trying to be as supportive as possible. So let us pray. Blessed are you, gracious God. You have given us life and freedom to be your people in the world. Blessed are you, gracious God. You have called us into the church and into this community of faith, pilgrims together on the journey into new creation. Blessed are you, gracious God. You have touched our hearts with hope, so that we long to see the day of your salvation. Accept now these gifts we bring, our hearts, our minds, our hands, our feet. Enable us to use them for the coming of your new community of justice and shalom. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Before we sing our final hymn this morning, a couple of things. First of all, I don't know about you folks at home, but I really appreciate the folks who are here, so I have lovely faces to talk to, and I like the pictures in the pews because it reminds me of some of the variety and nature in our congregation, which is always delightful. But if you have anything you'd like me to talk about on Sunday mornings that I haven't talked about, different topics or ideas or questions, please send them in and let me know, because I can go all kinds of different directions. So it'd be helpful to know that I was addressing issues or topics or stuff that you'd like to. So please feel free to do that. It would be great. And feedback is always welcome on any aspect of what we're doing. Again, I'd like to thank Dan for being always incredibly creative. So I really appreciate, Dan, everything you're doing. Thank Dave for always here, always playing, taking care of things. We really appreciate that, Dave. Thank Courtney for the variety of things she does, not just here on Sunday morning, but the week through. And I always have this terrible feeling that some Sunday we're just going to be me here talking. So all the AV stuff just saves my bacon, and I believe yours at home as well. So thank you very much for that, Courtney, all the work that you do. And Andrea, who faithfully comes out every week and makes all this kind of stuff happen and puts it on the wild Ethernet for everybody to look at. Appreciate that too, Andrea. Thank you very much. And Linda for being here this morning and singing. Really appreciate you coming out. That was very kind of you. And I'm going to, as I said before, I found it very difficult to just take the candles away and stop doing it. So I'm taking 2 away a Sunday and still lighting them in memory of the folks in Nova Scotia that went through the massacre there, and in particular the Mountie and their family. And we're just sort of slowly moving away from it, but still remembering them, and I'll light them again this morning, and we'll continue that until we've dispersed with all the candles. And also, as we do that, I think probably the way the world is going, there's always things that are happening, and so please, while I'm lighting the candles, you add your own things at home to those things that you want to reflect on and meditate on as well, and be at peace. Thank you. Thanks, Dan. So our next hymn, When Hands Reach Out Beyond Divides.
Reach out beyond divide, and hope is truly found. Each chain of hate will fall away, and bells of peace shall sound. And bells of peace shall sound, and bells of peace shall sound. Each chain of hate shall fall away, and bells of peace shall sound. When fear no longer guides our steps, and days of war are done, God's dream for all shall live anew. Our hearts will heal as one. Our hearts will heal as one. Our hearts will God's dream for all shall live anew. Our hearts will heal as one. When race and creed blind us no more, a neighbor's face we'll see, and we shall dance the whole world round, for love will set us free. For love, yes, love will set us free. For love will set us free. And we shall dance the whole world round, for love will set us free.
And now may the peace of God, which surpasses all human understanding, keep watch over our minds and hearts, bodies and souls, this day and forevermore. Amen.
Go now in peace, never be afraid. God will go with you each hour of every day. Go now in faith, steadfast, strong, and true. Know God will guide you in all you do. Go now in love and show you believe. Reach out to others so all the world can see. God will be there, guiding with God's love.